Technology is everywhere, and so should a systematic philosophical reflection on technology. The Working Group on Philosophy of Technology, WGPT, at the University of Leuven in Belgium aims to create a platform to do precisely that. You're listening to WGPTalks, a series where we give the opportunity to our own members to talk about what fascinates them at the crossroads of technology and society. Today, we talk with Mauritz Kelchtermans on the topic of the end of the world. The end of times, and the world is going to end. There's a lot of fiction on that, but apparently there's also a lot of philosophy on that topic. And for that, we are here today with Mauritz Kelchtermans, one of the members of our working group. Perhaps let's start briefly to say something about yourself. If I'm correctly informed, you were once a chemist, but now a philosopher. How did that happen?
When I was young, still young, I had an extremely good course in logics and philosophy of science by Herman Roelants. And so I had started studying chemistry, and I was really, flabbergasted by his appearance and by the things he was talking about. So I've been keeping in mind that if I ever could do something, I would go back to philosophy. But the financial situation at home did not allow me to direction, so I had to continue my chemistry and then started working in that. And then at a certain time, when I felt that I'd worked enough in chemistry, I thought, now I'm going to stop and I'm going to truly do my youth dream and go back to philosophy. Started indeed the abridged program for the bachelor and then master, and now PhD in philosophy of AI. That's the very short story. It's really, going back, and so really switching life and switching directions completely, which is really very pleasant also, and very deepening and widening, and which I really can encourage everybody to do if you can afford it. So it's really a new life. My afterlife is maybe even better than my first life. So truly enjoyable.
And so your PhD project is on AI, but one of those topics that keeps popping up and fascinates you is precisely this end of time, the end of the world, the end of humanity.
Yeah, because that was in fact the subject of my master thesis. And there's, a nice or a sad story about it. So when I was preparing to choose the subject for my master thesis, one of my brothers died. So we were 6 at home. So my parents had already died. My youngest brother had died. My second brother had died. So I was really, struck by that. And then, if that happens close to you, and he was one of my favorite brothers, you start thinking about, what is still in there for you, for yourself. And then there is the law of Laplace, that you can calculate what the probability is that you can survive somebody, or that you can reach the average age of somebody else. And that's a pretty frightening result in my case. But of course, I cannot write a master thesis on that. So that's why I really switched to the broader picture. So the end of humanity, the end of Earth, and then the end of times, in fact. Because there is quite some philosophy, like we said in the beginning, and there is also quite some science behind. So that was a perfect combination, given my background then in science and then my newly acquired small background in philosophy. It was a nice combination to put together then, indeed.
So there are two central questions about this topic, namely, when is it going to happen? And what will be the cause? So let's start with the first question, like, when is it going to happen? Can we say something meaningful about that question?
Yeah, so in 1993, a scientist called Richard Gott has made the doomsday, or has developed the doomsday paradox. So he has been calculating that with 95% probability, the world could end at the minimum at 12 years, or 7.8 million years. And so the more the world exists, of course, the more those limits extend, of course. Now, what I've done, in fact, is recalculate that, taking into account the number of people that have been living on Earth until, I've updated that for last year, and then also taking into account the current lifetime of Homo sapiens, which is something like 300,015 years. So if I do that, then I can reach numbers between something like 31 and 31 million years, depending on where we are in this stage of humanity, whether we're belonging to the first percent, and so there are still many more people to come, and then we're at 31 million years still to go. If we're at the last 99% of the 108.7 billion that have been born so far, then we only have got a very limited time to go. Now, I don't think that's a very good calculation. I mean, the calculation which I think is more useful is really to take into account the number of people that are born, because, I mean, as you know, we clearly have got a very high impact on Earth and on we're consuming Earth. I mean, they're consuming much more than we're allowed every year and so forth. So there is a very negative impact. There are two things happening. So the number of births is going down and the number of deaths is going down. The number of people that are dying is also going down. So if you take that into account and you allow, for instance, for 15 billion people on Earth at the maximum, which we probably never gonna reach, taking that as a number, then you can calculate again something between 12 years and 8,000 years only, which is a totally different picture than the 31 million or the numbers that God has been calculating. So the end seems near. Harari also thinks that we're not going to live another 1,000 years as Homo sapiens. Other people still think that we're going to live long. But I do think that what we're doing, for instance, with climate change and what we're doing with really, I mean, all the consumption of energy and of minerals and so forth, that there is a limit to our existence. And then we're creating all kinds of problems ourselves, which could even, I mean, speed up the extinction of mankind. So I do think there is an end. But of course, you cannot tell where we are, whether we are that first percent or whether we're at 50% or whether we're at 99%. But I mean, the numbers, are limited. It's not, we're not going to live 1 billion years, and we're not going to live 1 trillion years. The longest time a Homo species has been living is 1.8 million years. That's Homo erectus. So it would be extremely nice if we can get to 1 million years. But I'm pessimistic about that.
And that is a kind of central assumption ID in this whole calculation business, to look at how long other Homo species have lived and then see how long we still have.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Homo erectus was much less what I call a bad for Earth. I mean, we're really changing Earth. Yeah, and then people like Hawking and Musk, of course, say that we have to expand and we have to go to other planets. But I mean, that's not trivial either. I mean, it's a nice idea, but it's not necessarily easy to do and to really recreate or to extend human life over there. So I got my doubts about that too.
The whole statistical calculations here reminds me also of a science fiction book that I read by Stephen Baxter called Simply Time, I think, which makes a very similar but slightly different argument. Indeed, starting from the following question, like, why do I live right now? Why don't I live in other times? Why am I not Roman or in the future, etc.? And a kind of statistical argument is then, well, if there would still be so many humans that will be born after me, then the chance that I would live now is very low. But if we are indeed, and there are now, of course, more people alive than in the past have ever been, etc., then it seems highly likely that we live in the end of times. That's the kind of speculation that the book starts from.
Yeah. I mean, there is an argument in there. I mean, it could be used. I mean, you cannot necessarily falsify the argument. So there is truth in there. We've already been there with 108 billion people. The Earth is changing. We're now indeed with the highest number of people ever alive. So initially the expectation was that we're going to go up to 11 billion on Earth. I mean, by 2100. Now those expectations have been revised Apparently already at 2060, the number of people is going to go down. I just read an article this morning in the newspaper that in China already the number of people is decreasing. So the population is decreasing because of their one-child policy of a number of years ago. So things are going to happen. Africa is definitely going to decrease the number of people that will be born, because when civilization goes up, when women get a smartphone or a phone, they're gonna have less children. So things are definitely going to happen. So there is going to be a decrease, and ultimately it could be extremely bad if we still continue to wreck the earth, to call it that way.
So there are a lot of meaningful and perhaps also meaningless speculations about when it's going to happen. But let's turn to the second question then. How is it going to happen? Because philosophers have also thought about different scenarios, different reasons, different ways in which we could all die or the world could end.
Yeah, for that one, I've really used the terminology or the system set up by Nick Bostrom and his group in England. So they talk about existential risks, which are risks then whereby humans are going to be decimated, whereby there is no chance that humans are going to survive, or whether the potential of human survival is going to be really taken to a minimum almost. And they have proposed three types of existential risks. One they called intermediate risks, which are in fact like a third world war, like pollution, like terrorism, all those kind of things that we already know of right now and which have been existing for, as long as we know in history, in fact. Those risks I do not consider necessarily eschatological, so they are not necessarily going to lead to the extinction of mankind, but they're going to create havoc, clearly. Lots of people are going to die because of those, and people are already dying because of those. So I would consider them much more global catastrophic risk. Now, there are two types of risks which I really consider as existential risks, and they're at one side natural risks, like for instance asteroids that would hit Earth, and we've had quite a few asteroids that have been hitting Earth, big planetoids in fact, that have been hitting Earth over the past 500 million years. And the one we know best about is the one that fell on Earth in close to Cancun in Yucatan in Mexico, which killed the dinosaurs, which allowed humans to appear, or mammals to appear, and so forth. That one, according to astronomers, those kind of planetoids, they should hit Earth every 50 to 100 million years. And for people that are working in that field, that the new planetoid impact is already overdue. So we're expecting one. Of course, there is nothing coming in the near future, but they expect something to happen. If there is any value in the past that we can project on the future, then something is bound to happen within this 35 million years or so, if we still stick to that statistic.
There's an eerie connection with the pandemic then, because in the case of pandemics, there was also this idea that it should have already happened, a pandemic.
Exactly.
As they warned.
And so then a number of other things which are definitely gonna happen, on which scientists agree. So within something like 1 billion years, for instance, the Earth will have moved out of the habitable ring around the sun, because the sun sheds more and more energy, there's more light coming from the sun because it's really burning its hydrogen in nuclear fusion. So the sun gets warmer, and then so the ring, the habitable ring around the sun is going to move in the direction of Mars. So within 1 billion years, starting as of 500 million years already, water is going to start disappearing. We're really going to be sterilized. Water is going to be boiled off. We're going to be like Venus and Mercurius and so forth. That is definitely already an end of the Earth.
But that seems very far in the future.
That is,
Should we care about these things? One could wonder.
Yeah, we are caring about that because, for instance, in June, they're going to set up an experiment in which they're going to launch a balloon and then try and create via aerosols shadow on the Earth. So that's also, of course, to do with climate change. But some crazy geoengineering guys have got this idea that they really can spread a kind of aerosol cloud around the Earth to really, minimize the effect then of the sun. And we don't know what the consequences are going to be, but they're really thinking about it, and they're going to do that first experiment pretty soon now.
It's not just mapping when the world is going to end, but also trying to prevent it through geoengineering and other methods.
Yeah, so the same thing is happening, in fact, with the asteroids and the planetoids. So NASA and ESA are going to launch spacecrafts that could really put or change the direction of an asteroid also. And so that's going to happen in 2022, I think, up to 2025 and so forth. So we've already had this Japanese spacecraft that has been mining asteroids. So now we really want to do something about trying to change the direction of the asteroid, move it out of our way, and do things about that. Because it's a bad idea to do like in Armageddon, a movie with Bruce Willis and so forth, to really nuke an asteroid. You cannot do that, because then everything is going to fall back on Earth. So we're going to create another nuclear bomb on Earth. So we're working on that. So that's a good thing, that indeed we're following up on what is happening with those asteroids. And some people do really want to work on climate change, and then by extension on the coming effects of the sun indeed. Then the other things which are going to happen that we're pretty sure about. So as of something like 2 billion years, we're going to have the merger between Andromeda and the Milky Way, which is going to create a new system, which is called Melkomeda. And then within 6 billion years, the sun is really going to explode, because then nuclear fusion is going to be over. The sun is really going to explode. It's going to become a big red star, and it will reach up to here. So Earth will disappear then, in fact. And then ultimately, of course, there is the end of the universe, for which there are different scenarios also. Which could be a big rip, so everything torn apart, or a big chill, so everything's still continuing to expand like it's going on right now, or it could be a big squeeze, so going back to the stage of the Big Bang, and then maybe there is going to be a new Big Bang. So, some people are arguing indeed for a cyclical system where a Big Bang expansion, reduction, new Big Bang expansion, reduction. And so some people claim indeed that we're currently in one of those sequences, and that is going to be a next sequence, and that there were sequences before.
And this way how the world could end and the universe could end. But all these examples we have mentioned so far are, well, you could call them natural existential risks. But there is this other category of the typical story is not so much nature is going to end, but we are ending nature ourselves, the anthropogenic existential risks.
Absolutely, yeah. And so there are 5 anthropogenic risks. Anthropogenic risks are really the risks that we've been creating with the start of the Anthropocene, which I put with the detonation of the first nuclear bomb. So, geologists are putting them somewhere else, but in my simple view on things is it's really the detonation of that first nuclear bomb in New Mexico in 1945. So when the first radioactive deposits started appearing on Earth. So the first one over there is really nuclear warfare. Countries have been developing nuclear bombs as of 45, as you know. And at a certain stage, around 92, I think, there were more than 50,000 nuclear bombs available on Earth. Then with the SALT negotiations there, that number has been decreasing, but we're still at more than 10,000 nuclear bombs that are available to something like 10 countries. And most of them are in the US and in Russia. Then China has got quite a few, France, UK. We, of course, need to worry about those, but the countries that most people worry about are India and Pakistan, because they do not get along very well, of course, and then North Korea also. So if, again, they would start to use nuclear bombs either in a regional conflict or in a world conflict, in a global conflict, then that would constitute the end of humanity probably, because of nuclear winter, because of the loss of food supply, because of all the radioactive gases and so forth. Anything that we already know of what happened in Hiroshima and in Yokohama and so forth. And so it's really, that theory of mutually assured destruction, where, people keep on building up warfare and so forth. And for instance, they're doing with lots of other things now also. So that is one. So there, I mean, for instance, they've set up this doomsday clock where an association in the US every year calculates how far we are from midnight, in fact. So they're again pessimistic about that. But that's totally under control. And we've shown at least that we have been able to reduce the big number to a much smaller number, but we still have got quite a lot. So we can really extinguish all of humanity many, many, many times, of course.
What is the clock saying right now, the doomsday?
I think it's 80 seconds before midnight or so, but I need to look it up. Don't recall it, but it's very close. It's one of the lowest points ever now.
Okay. And that has to do with nuclear weapons?
It has to do with nuclear weapons. Yeah. Only nuclear weapons. Because the other ones, I mean, of course, you can also look at chemical weapons, at biological weapons, at radiological weapons. Normally, they're only considered as weapons of mass disruption. So not mass destruction. So nuclear weapons, really mass destruction under the different forms, of course. And then the other ones, the CBR weapons, then, as they call it, they're weapons of mass disruption, as they have been used for Russian spies and as they have been used, for instance, in the First World War over here and so forth. The second anthropogenic risk is artificial intelligence. So there, I mean, people like Hawking, Musk, Gates, and so forth fear that at some stage will head into singularity, where the super intelligent machine or a number of machines are going to take over and are going to treat us like shit almost, that they think we're just going to be slaves or just good enough to put in a zoo, for instance, as to remember how we look like, but they're going to take over. Of course, to get there, we first need to have artificial general intelligence, so human-like intelligence, which we're working on. OpenAI and Microsoft and probably DeepMind are heavily investing into that. And then only we can reach ASI, so artificial superintelligence. And the fear is there that we reach AGI, general intelligence, that things are going to take off exponentially. So really that same scheme as with Corona.
But it would be the end of humanity, not the end of...
That could be it. I mean, it's really going to depend on how they're going to treat us. If we talk now very futuristic, like, are we going to be integrating with them? Are we going to become all cyborgs? That could be a solution for us to survive. But we're not going to be Homo sapiens anymore. We're going to be Homo cyborgensis or something like that. Or are they really going to get rid of us? Or are they going to put us in a zoo or whatever they're going to do with us? Are they going to treat us as slaves and so forth? Now, there are people, of course, who are very afraid of that thing, and that we need to align our values with developments in AI and so forth. So people are struggling with that, and people are arguing heavily for that. Quite a few other people that are working in the field don't think that is ever going to happen. So it's really a fight between the more scared people and the ones that are working in the field, and we have to admit, of course, a lot of the things we're doing in AI really need quite some human involvement. So they don't think that AI can take off that fast. Now, on the other hand, of course, there is already AutoML, which has been developed by Google, where an AI generates its own AIs. So things are happening over there. So, I mean, nothing can be excluded. I mean, and again, if it would be exponential, then it could create, again, quite some problem. And that is, of course, that's something we really have to watch. And for instance, Hawking has got a nice statement about that. So on the short term, he doesn't see a big problem because we probably can control it. But he really wonders who is going to be controlling it in the long term, whether it's really still humans or whether it's going to be a machine, which and probably is also has got consciousness and all kinds of things, just like us, and maybe probably even better and much more, and swarm coupled and all kinds of things. I mean, totally optimized, of course. So you can create quite a few science fiction scenarios to try and image what's going to happen in there. Yeah.
AI is a very popular scenario nowadays to end the world, but it's not the only one. The world can also end in gray goo. What is gray goo?
So that really arises out of the domain of nanotechnology. So where we're going to make small systems between 1 nanometer and a few hundred nanometers. And The initial thinking about that when they were developed and when they found applications in the market also, because they're already heavily used in a whole number of products, the initial idea was that they would replicate just like viruses do. And that because of uncontrolled replication, then they would really consume all of the material on Earth, including all humans also. Now, with all the developments in this century, in fact, they have been seeing that it doesn't need viral replication. I mean, you could, of course, use a virus as a kind of nanobody, but I mean, normally, if you're going to use inorganic stuff, then you're going to make that. You're not going to use replication. So that gray goose scenario, in fact, is now much less important. What on the contrary now has happened is the fact that that people in defense have been developing nano bombs. Because what's the interest of a nano bomb? That you can use so a bomb consisting of nanomaterials to really invade a country. So you can use a nano bomb that will kill all the humans and that will leave the whole infrastructure intact. So it's easy to occupy a country then because the buildings are still there. And you can start raiding that particular country. And so there again, so that you can use either inorganic materials or you can use viruses also.
How should I imagine that a nanobomb? Is that then just a kind of artificial virus that infects everyone in a certain area?
Yeah, that could be it, or it could be just inorganic. I mean, small inorganic materials also. Now, on the other side, there is also, there are good things coming out with that too. I mean, so small nanobombs, in fact, are already used in medicine. So small nanomaterials, because you really can take a small nanobot, in fact, into, for instance, a cancer cell. You can blow up that nanobot and that will kill the cancer cell also. So there are good and bad applications, but of course, I mean, again, parallel in what's going on with chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. Also here, defense has taken hold of it and has been developing it and continues to develop that. So that's the other problem. Now we talked about the viruses, so that is the next one. So synthetic biology, so all of the developments going on over there. I mean, and then CRISPR-Cas, for instance, is a very prominent one for which Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna got the Nobel Prize last year. So with CRISPR-Cas, you can design, you can do genetic engineering in a fast, easy, efficient way and so forth. So you can start engineering human bodies or human embryos like the Chinese Kai He-Yang Hui has been doing, 3 years ago. Luckily, there is a moratorium on that, so we're not allowed to go further in that. But still, I mean, that moratorium is probably not going to hold forever. So we're definitely going to engineer human life. And there, the fear is that, so there are two possible ways that things can happen then. So it could be that in synthetic biology then is going to be used to create again a successor to Homo sapiens, a much more performant successor to Homo sapiens. Certainly then when integrating with AI and with nanotechnology and with cognitive sciences and so forth. So that could really be, and it looks like we're going that way, slowly but steadily. So that integration is more and more happening. Like also with Neuralink, set up by Elon Musk, where there is a brain-computer interface, which worked really well for a monkey that could play an Atari game or something like that. So we're making progress in that field too. The other big thing, and that is something we've been experiencing now the last year, is really that engineered viruses could create pandemics. So that we indeed would have pathogens which are potentially pandemic. And so because of the accessibility of CRISPR-Cas and other synthetic biology techniques, people can do that now in their garage. You can do it as a hacker, you can do it as a do-it-yourself biologist and so forth. So things could happen falling back on bioterror then, where indeed terrorists are going to develop those things and spread them around. Or it could be bioerror, that a deadly virus could escape out of a lab. And some people claim that is what has happened in Wuhan. Of course, it has not been proven by that research commission of the WHO, but some people claim that is what has happened, in fact. So, and in fact, Corona is only a minor pandemic. If people that really fear, again, like Gates and other people have been writing books about that, they fear there is going to be much more drastic and much more harmful viruses underway, and that they will hit us at some time. And hopefully, again, people are now going to take precautions, and there's going to be much more research into those kind of things and so forth. So that is in fact number 4. And then, like I said, the combination of all of those, in fact, of course, except for nuclear warfare, the combination of AI, of nanotechnology, of synthetic biology with cognitive sciences, in fact, that ultimately can lead to first an extra human, then a transhuman, then a post-human creature, which will be, heavily different from what we are. So it's not artificial superintelligence, but really another kind of homo, not Homo sapiens anymore. We're really then refurbished. We've got all kinds of new body parts, and we're swarm coupled, and we only have to think, and other people will know what we're thinking and so forth. All those things are going to happen. They're working on that. Silicon Valley is really working on that, heavily working on that. So they're going to come too. So that also might be an end of Homo sapiens as we know it right now. So it still could be some kind of humane type of creature, but it's going to be different from what we know right now. And again, for instance, Harari has been writing about that, and I follow his thinking in that also, that things are not necessarily going to happen within the next 10, 20 years or so, but maybe by 2100, so things might have changed dramatically, if we still are living by that time.
Okay, so synthetic viruses, nanobots, robots on the loose, nuclear weapons, natural disasters, always how the world, humanity could end. But how should we relate to that, especially given the current pandemic situation? What kind of philosophical attitude should we take towards those risks? Does that mean we have to somehow take control and try to avoid them, or should we almost be more fatalistic and acknowledge and accept that the world is going to end? There are so many ways, we cannot avoid them all. How do you stand towards those questions?
You certainly should not become fatalistic, and I do think what we have done in Corona, not always very successful, but we really have to integrate, society and science. And like, for instance, now also what Europe has been doing with their proposal now for AI regulation, I do think those are the ways to go. We really have to integrate whatever scientists and philosophers are developing and are reflecting on, and take that combined knowledge and really develop in a political system, or develop laws, develop regulations, implement all kinds of ethical procedures also to minimize the risk. It could be it's going to be, if it all works well, and if we don't do crazy things and awfully bad things, it's going to be a nice future also. But then, of course, we have to control nuclear warfare, and we have to put some limits on AI, on synthetic biology, on nanotechnology and so forth. But if we do that, I do think it could be a very bright future. But it's going to take quite some effort, quite some regulation, I think, and quite some philosophical reflection, because a scientist, of course, wants to develop new things, and philosophy really needs to warn them about what are the dangers and how things could be developed that are going to mitigate those risks and so forth. But we really have to worry and to keep on, to really stay vigilant. So really watch what's going to happen, and then and talk about that and do things about that.
So despite all the existential risk, we can remain optimistic. And then a nice plea for the value of philosophy of technology, integrating technology and society. Okay, thank you, Mauritz, for giving us some insight into all these issues of how the world is going to end. It was very fascinating, and I hope to see you again in the future for our next episode.
Good. Thank you so much. Bye.